Hello, and welcome to Monday Madness, everyone's favorite wacky strategy show. This week we're taking a look at the mass Man-at-Arms strategy. The idea of the strategy is very simple. You make your standard Man-at-Arms rush, but instead of adding archers or something meta and boring like that, you just add more Man-at-Arms, and you don't stop making Man-at-Arms until you won the game. Good civs for this strategy are Goths, Japanese, Celts, Bulgarians, Slavs, Aztec, Magyars, Malians, whichever your fancy, or random into. Now, let's get into some games. In our first game of today, yours truly is playing as the Goths, for the cheap infantry, free loom, and essentially what is free arson. My build order is not too bad, and I can afford 5 militia and the Man-at-Arms upgrade with ease. But crucially, I completely forget to scout my opponent because I was pushing deer instead, and my opponent can then unhinderedly send his scouts forward into my base. Ideally, you would want your Man-at-Arms to be inside your opponent's base to already prevent him from moving out. We trade villagers back and forth, but eventually I managed to clear him out of my base with a few spears. Men-at-Arms, on the other hand, are a lot more difficult to get rid of, which will be a reoccurring theme for this video. In order to deal with Men-at-Arms, you need to make archers or Men-at-Arms of your own. Scouts also work, but they don't trade well until after you get bloodlines. My opponent doesn't fancy having 6 Men-at-Arms and a scout in his space, so he decides to go for some archers. And this is a good move, and he manages to force my Men-at-Arms away. But since this is a mass Man-at-Arms strategy, the clip doesn't end here. I add more Men-at-Arms and also research scaled mail armor. But he adds more archers and the fletching, so we definitely still have a game on our hands. I try my very best to be overwhelming and mainly to keep him from moving into my base for a counterattack, and this does even result in a few villager picks. But eventually he musters enough courage to venture out to my base, and only leaving a small force of archers to defend, and I think this is a really good move from him. He finds a handful of villagers, but I already went up to Castle Age and my upgrades come in, and his feudal age archers are chanceless. My opponent manages to go Castle Age himself, and by now he has massed up a scary amount of crossbowmen, and he's moving out to my base once again. By doing so, he is leaving his own base horribly exposed for my now longswords, and they're wreaking havoc on his base. Eventually his crossbows even get cleaned up by my fully upgraded longswordsmen, and having lost the bulk of his army, he's unable to defend from the massive horde of longswordsmen descending upon his base, and he is forced to resign. Game number 2 is sent to us by a big fan of the show, namely Lael, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Lael is playing as the Japanese for that amazing faster attack on his infantry, and he's playing against the Goths. And just by looking at this matchup, I'm expecting large amounts of infantry from both players, and hopefully a very long feudal war. Unsurprisingly, we see Man-at-Arms from both players, but I think Blue is underestimating the power of Japanese Man-at-Arms here, because he takes a fight with even numbers, which is just going to result in a landslide victory for the Japanese Man-at-Arms. Red even manages to defeat a second wave of equal numbers, but a third one is just a bit too much. Both players go up to Castle Age, but Blue has now realized the strength of the Japanese infantry and he transitions into crossbows instead. Now I wanna pause here and ask you to predict who's going to win this engagement. There's around 20 longswords versus 20 crossbows, full upgrades, and a mangonel each, and a castle is being built. Have you got your prediction in? As you may have guessed from my very biased opinion of this strategy, it ends up with a landslide victory for the longswords, and Blue is even forced to delete his castle. Realizing that his opponent's army mostly consists of archers, Lael adds more siege, which could be very problematic for Blue to deal with. Luckily for Blue, he gets a defensive castle up just in time, and Red is forced back. Now Blue has invested a lot of resources into his failed attack and this defense, so Red manages to go up a lot faster to the Imperial Age. and not wanting to deal with the upgrades, Blue takes a fight before them, but he is destroyed in the soul-crushing Mangonel shot. Ouch, I felt that one in my heart. Blue hangs around a bit to recover from the shock, but eventually he realizes the futility of resisting such a beautifully orchestrated offense, and he resigns. Thank you very much for your contribution, Leo.
Game number 2 is sent to us by everyone's second favorite Swede, PPC. PPC is doing his best Huang tribute, and he is playing as the Celts against the Magyars. Celts of course having a faster infantry, and the wood bonus never hurts, but he's pitted against the free forging of the Magyars, which could prove very interesting. PPC has a nice build, and more importantly, very good scouting. His men-at-arms are in the base of the enemy before the scouts move out, which is the timing I was referring to in my first game, and this is resulting in some nice forward pressure while being completely safe at home. Since PPC has one single spearman in the mix, Red is too careful to take the engagement with the scouts, and his food gathering is suffering because of it. Red adds an archer range, but crucially he is unable to take any gold, and thus he can't produce any archers. Red is fighting tooth and nail to defend his archer range and just about manages to keep it alive, but still he is unable to take gold, and Skirms and Scout just aren't cutting it. They're just not good enough to deal with men-at-arms. Red can never catch a break, and after PPC once again is in on his wood lines, he's had enough and rage quits. Thank you very much for your contribution, Postponing Camel. Game number 4 is sent to us by everyone's favorite emote, Regnirak. And once again, we have a very interesting matchup on our hands. This time, it's a Goth Mirror. Regni is a bit faster up to feudal age, but this isn't as game-changing as Blue not yet having built the barracks. He has no militia of his own, while Regni's militia aren't just knocking on the door, they're already inside and whacking away at his villagers. Something must have gone terribly wrong with Blue's build, since he's forced to panic collect wood in order to afford a barracks and a stable. Regni is 4 villagers ahead when Blue finally gets some scout out in defense. But Regni adds a spearman, and Blue thinks better of it. Realizing that engaging that army with scouts would be suicide, Blue decides to go for the counterattack. And this counterattack is hitting Regni pretty hard. Blue manages to kill a bunch of villagers and get some very important time to recover from his disastrous start. But much like the first game, the scouts are easily chased off by a few spearmen, while Regni's army is allowed to roam free in Blue's economy. Blue retreats home and adds more scouts, and he's finally able to breathe and to take some gold. But now he's struggling to take wood instead. Once he finally manages to put down 2 ranges, it's very much too late, and Regni is already up to castle age. The upgrade comes in, and Regni is smashing down the gates of the only safe wood line from Blue. He then goes for the style points and acts as an inspiration to us all by going for the town center. The opponent is so amazed by Regni's performance that he even compliments him on his victory. Truly a masterpiece. Thank you for your contribution, Regnirak. Now to quickly summarize the mass men-at-arms strategy. Much like previous strategies, this one is fun and aggressive. Also much like previous strategies, you need to do damage or at least put on some pressure on your opponent in order for this to work. The build is also very easy if you already know a men-at-arms build order, and it could be kinda tricky for your opponent to counter. Keep in mind that these games are played in the matchmaking against players that are of the same rating as the participants. They may not work against the highest pros in the scene, but they work well enough for you to have an interesting game. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Monday Madness. Remember to give this video a like if you have enjoyed the content, and hey, why don't you subscribe not to miss out on future videos? If you would like to take part in the next video, you can also join my Discord for a sneak peek at the next week's strategy. Maybe I'll be casting your games next. Bye for now and have an amazing rest of your week.